So welcome to another episode of Over a Brew, and today we're going to focus on AI and accessibility, and we've got some amazing people to talk about their experiences. But I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and what they do and what they're going to help bring to the conversation. So I'm going to ask Laura to join in via the screen and introduce your role and what your perspective is and what you'll bring into this accessibility chat, if you like.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. So my name's Laura Hutton and I work for JISC. I work in their advice team, and we're all called subject specialists, which I don't really like the title, but that's what it is. And my subject specialism is accessibility. And so I help colleges and universities across UK education sector to implement accessibility practice into their workflows and to help staff and students making things more accessible for staff and students to use with each other.
Thank you, Laura. And Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Dando and I'm Senior Head of Learner Journey and Inclusive Learning at Cardiff and Vale College. So as part of my role, I'm also the college's statutory elenco. So inclusion is something that I'm really passionate about in terms of teaching and learning, as well as effective support for learners.
Fantastic. And I'm Leanne Howe, the Teaching, Learning and Professional Development Manager for Gower College, Swansea, helping sort of facilitate the conversation today. And what we're going to focus on today is AI and accessibility. And we're going to think about the sector as a whole, which is where you're going to come in, Laura, which is fantastic to help us think about just perspectives and the sector and what you've picked up. But we're going to have some case in practice with what's happening at Cardiff and Vale. But as I frame the discussion today, this really follows on from what we've been doing, and we're thinking about these series of episodes where we're doing Mind the Gap, Bridge the Gap and Close the Gap. And for anybody that's tuning into this or has been in the meeting, Mind the Gap is let's think about what the barriers and the challenges are that we really do have to think about. And when we think about accessibility, but we're also thinking about inclusion and inclusive learning, then we'll move the discussions on, not today, but in later episodes, what things could happen to bridge the gap. And certainly some of the things you share today, Charlotte, will be part of that. And then we'll move to close the gap, what we can then do as a sector. But I'm going to start, if I can, with yourself, Laura, coming straight to you, straight in. It's okay. So based on your work with sort of Welsh groups and your work with JISC, what are some of the key challenges that you've observed across the sector thinking about digital accessibility in learning environments?
Okay, so honestly, the challenges in Wales are pretty much the same right across the whole of the UK. I think one of the biggest ones we see is staff confidence. People want to do this. It is winning over hearts and minds, but I think there's no argument. There's not a lot of people who will turn around and say, no, I'm not willing to make things more accessible. It's about not having the confidence that they're doing it right. People want to do it right, but worry that they're going to get it wrong. And so it's a bit inconsistent. You'll find lots of institutions who have pockets of work that's happening and it's really good, but there's other areas within the same institution who lack the awareness and don't know that they have responsibilities to producing accessible content as well. So and obviously the funding and time are factors, but lack of training and low confidence, I think, are a couple of the biggest challenges.
I'm going to come to you, Charlotte, in a second and ask you, do you agree with those challenges? But just for everyone listening, how would we simply define what we mean by accessible content?
Okay, so accessible content in terms of digital content, the regulations cover pretty much anything that's viewed through a browser. So you're looking at websites, the content that's on the websites, PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoints, your VLE, images within the websites. You're looking at video content, audio content. It basically, if you're looking at it through a browser, it's pretty much in scope of these regulations. And so that's the definition in terms of the compliance aspect.
Thank you, Laura. And I think that's a really nice way to think about it, whatever can be used through a browser, because our learners and our staff, they deal with content as we move into a more digital space in our teaching. We are continuing to use different cloud-based applications, or in our internal VLE systems, we are using everything through a browser. So Charlotte, would you agree? Would you agree those are the challenges that at Cardiff and Vale that you found?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're definitely the challenges. It is a challenge with curriculum design, and obviously there are a lot of people that come from a lot of industries and backgrounds that go into teaching, and there's a lot of information and a lot that tutors need to do in terms of what does good look like in the classroom and how do we make it accessible, particularly with online content. But there are principles, and I think for us the key has been picking some key things that are going to improve accessibility and not trying to do all of it and not overwhelm people with you need to have this and this in place to be really accessible. But actually, what few things could you do today that improve your teaching tomorrow? And when that's embedded, what are the next things that we could pick up as an organisation and work on together?
And I think that's important, isn't it? Because it does feel overwhelming, as you said, Laura, and some people don't know where to go. And it's about getting across this ability that it's chipping away and it's not redesigning everything you've got all in one go, because that's something that feels overwhelming and burdensome and will stop people from wanting and feeling that they can do it. If I'm going to stick with you, Charlotte, so what do you think the drivers have been, other than the legislation, what do you think the drivers have been at Cardiff and Vale for you to really get hold of digital accessibility the way you have done?
I mean, we're seeing more and more learners coming through who are aware of the needs that they have, aware of support that they might need, particularly with the change to the ALN system. We are seeing more learners coming through with plans and specific requests for information being presented in certain ways. So we're really keen to ensure that in terms of meeting that workload and meeting learners' needs, that we're aiming to meet most people's needs through our usual practice. So where we can make our content really accessible and we can provide that choice and flexibility and present information in a range of formats, we aim to meet those needs through our usual practice rather than having to do something different for those learners.
I think that's important as well. You're saying that the learners themselves are much more aware now as well, aren't they? I'm going to stick with that though. So let's take it into where artificial intelligence comes in now, and how that and the type of approaches and the tools that you have used, how has that helped you do exactly what you said to help make your learner journey more of a successful process, to have much more of an accessible content or approach? How have you been using AI?
So we initially started using it as a team, our inclusive learning team. We've got sort of a really high volume of work in terms of learners coming through with individual development plans, learning and skills plans. And so we were really aware that we needed to look at how we reduce that workload so that we could maximise our resource in providing the support to learners on the ground and in our delivery. So we've actually been using AI to pilot our approaches to reducing that workload to the team. So we've been using Teams transcription during person-centred meetings. We've transcribed those meetings with everyone's consent. And then we've used that to upload to Copilot, where we've been able to get detailed summaries of a person's needs, as well as clear meeting action logs and minutes. And then we've actually used the summary of a person's needs and explored Magic School AI, where we've been able to put, we redact it to make sure that the information is obviously secure and anonymised, but we would put that information in that we'd have as our summary of need. And then we can also put any diagnostic information in. And it's been really great in summarising some person-centred outcomes for learners, which has helped us inform the writing of some of our additional learning provisions for learners and saved us time in terms of developing that content.
That sounds fantastic. And what I quite like is how you've talked about how one tool supporting another. And to somebody listening, that could sound like an awful lot of work. But are you saying actually, because of the AI and the way the systems work, and when you get things working well and you have got a nice structure and a nice framework, actually it's helping with productivity and time?
Yeah, and if you think in a person-centred meeting, you might have health there, you have other professionals, you have the young person, you have, parents and family. So to gather all of that detail and to generate those minutes and then to extract all of the relevant information to create a really detailed summary of that person's needs, capturing all of those viewpoints, is quite time consuming. So where we can use AI to draw out those key bits, obviously there's the human element then where you need to check it and add to it so that it does reflect that meeting and what you need to put into an IDP in section 2A, for example. But we've definitely seen the benefits. We've also seen the benefits where this year we've got to move from the SEN system to the ALN system, which means that the learners that have got learning and skills plans all need to be converted to IDPs. So that's quite a big piece of work in terms of transferring those documents that are structured in different ways. So although the information contained within those documents is similar, it's a big piece of work again to extract it. So we have used AI to support us with that.
And I come to Laura in a second for JISC's perspective, but in terms of your practitioners and the teams, do you see that information feeding then into contextualised statements, and do you see it feeding into teaching strategies and curriculum redesign? Have you seen evidence of that as well?
Yeah, and we've obviously been piloting it first as an inclusive learning team, but one of the benefits of Magic School AI is being able to put barriers that you see in. So you can list the barriers that you see a young person might have, and then it will give you a generated list of possible reasonable adjustments to consider. So in terms of, lecturers, tutors, rather than having to wait for a person to be free for advice, there's some prompts you can get. You can find it difficult if it's just you in the classroom and it's just you with that young person and you're thinking, oh, I've tried that and I'm not really sure what to try next, but I can see that this is still a difficulty. Actually, if I put that difficulty in, has it just generated some options for me to try and given me a little bit more to go with?
And I think it's also trying to empower the practitioner again, isn't it? Because of the changing legislation, because of the multitude of complexity that we've got, because there is so much more that we need to be aware of, and because of the strength of learner voice and parent voice, we really need to be much more responsive and much more vigilant. So Laura, from JISC's perspective, if I might ask you, what are some of the tools or any assistive technologies that you think have really had some good results in the sector that you think people should be aware of or should think about? Following on from what Charlotte was saying,
Well, our AI team has been doing various pilots. So they have worked with Teachermatic and LearnWise. There's also been the pilots running with Jamworks and there's various, there's a few. So I think we're most excited about that kind of fusion between AI and generative AI and how those two things can work together to really enhance the learning experience, and with obviously ethical and safe, secure use, how we can really make that experience for staff and students more personalised. And I think that's really where the two fuse together and become really exciting.
Yeah. And I think that's what's nice to hear you say. It's actually quite exciting. It's not just about that it's going to, save a bit of time. It's actually quite exciting. We've got a really great opportunity here to really transform learning experiences and transform curriculum and really rethink and reshape how we support all our learners. And we've had conversations outside of this space and things. It's sometimes we're focusing on the IDP needs or we're focusing on the ALN needs, but actually it's about getting it right for all our learners to access the lesson and reimagine and rethink our lessons and our planning and our curriculum and our support. That's, I think, as you say, Laura, it's actually exciting, isn't it? It really is about bringing things forward. You mentioned in the presentation, the workshop that we had earlier on in the week that some people might follow on, that there's the ability of AI to, and you've actually alluded to this as well, Charlotte, summarise complex information, and for things like, what else I picked up, break down tasks and things. People don't necessarily think that that's what AI or generative AI can actually do. But do you want to elaborate on that, on some of those actual sort of everyday approaches to learning, not just the content, but the approaches that AI can help with?
Yeah, so often students with additional needs, that blank page part of doing a piece of work is phenomenally overwhelming, and getting started can be really difficult. And so the idea of having an awful lot of information to read through and then distill and start it into a document of your own making can be really daunting. And so the AI can pull that information, as Charlotte was saying, can extract some of those key points and almost give you a starter for 10 so that you can start building upon that and putting your own stamp on the information and your take on the lesson. And I think it's important that we use AI as a tool to do the bits of work that are time consuming and, as we've already said, bit mundane, maybe that organising part of it, so that frees you up to get into the really exciting part, exploring the content, exploring what it means, how you're interpreting it. And I think, the AI is going to enhance what we do rather than do it for us. It's not about doing it for us, it's about helping us do it better and freeing us up to do more.
I really like that you flagged that up, because I think that's what we need to think about it. We need to think about it as another friend, don't we? We need to think about it as our really super duper office assistant, or as our study buddy if we're a learner. And actually it brings me on to what I was going to say to you, Charlotte, about that as well. It's about, not, like you said, it's not replacing us. And I think that's the fear at the moment, isn't it? That AI is going to replace us. No, you still need the teacher to process the information. You still need the ND teams to process and check it's the right thing. Yeah. But it's that blank page for the learner, but it's also the blank page for the staff and the educators and things as well. So Charlotte, it really follows on from what Laura was saying. How are you making sure that the AI complements what's being done and doesn't replace what's being done?
Yep. So for us, it's about looking at that person holistically and looking at their range of needs, looking at what support they need. We're not going to take that human element away where there's specific additional learning provision that someone needs that needs to be delivered by a person. But what we've been really looking at is where can we enable independence? Where can we use tools to support that learner to build their independence, to build towards employment and developing those employability skills and have the tools to self-scaffold? So like we were just talking about in terms of breaking tasks down, that's one of the things that we've been looking at with Goblin tools, how that can break tasks down for learners so they could put a title of a task that they've got to do, and it might seem like a really big and overwhelming task, and then they can actually put the level of how much do I need this to be broken down? Do I need lots of individual steps so that I can go step by step and I've got really smart targets and really short success criteria in terms of seeing how I'm achieving this really big whole that I've got to do? Or do I just need a little bit of scaffolding and actually the whole seems really overwhelming, but if I break it down into 3 steps and I can look at how long that's roughly going to take me and I can plan my time, then I might find it easier to get going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to pick up shortly things that have been brought up around ethical concerns and some data. So I'll come to you in a second, Laura. But just to finish on that point, Charlotte, we're talking about what we've already got and content we've already got. How do you think that AI and generative AI can help us be proactive in our approaches to curriculum and learners? How do you think, right, because we're doing it with learner information we've already got right now, this is what we're talking about, but let's take a step back. How do you think it could really help us at the forefront if we're teachers and we're planning new curriculum and planning new delivery or getting student information from transitions from schools? Do you see it helping us?
Yeah, I think it can help, as we were just talking about, Laura, in terms of the workload and extracting that information. And when we are sent, really detailed person-centred plans, documents, and there might be a real history of information about that young person as well as looking at the person that's in front of you today. And it's about how we pull all of that together. We were a little bit cautious to start off with. We were sort of considering, okay, we've got statutory duties for ALN, and are we okay to be using AI? Are there any legal implications? If we were to be taken to tribunal, could this be an issue if we've used AI to support some of our team in our processes? And we're pleased to say that we have sought legal advice, and AI is okay in principle, so long as we ensure that there's appropriate safeguards in place. And I think that's something that, colleges, organisations need to think about in terms of how you are using it, particularly if you're using it for processes around sensitive data and information like we are. So the key bits that we've picked out are confidentiality and privacy. So just ensuring that the way you use it, redacting information, maintaining the privacy rights of individuals, human oversight. So there has to be that quality assurance process. You have to, as we were just talking about, extract information, but actually the finished product is done by a team member who has looked at every part of it and ensured that it's reflective of what we needed to create and in line with the guidance around creating those statutory plans. We've also explored how we would embed that within within our inclusion panel procedures. So it's really clear how we're using it, and we're being open and transparent about that. And then considering in terms of our consent processes, where a young person has to consent to us making a decision about ALN or consent to us creating an IDP and a plan for them, they would also consent to us using this as a tool to inform that approach. And we haven't had any sort of pushback. It's been really positive. And I think that the people that we've been working with, both professionals and learners, have seen that the level of detail that we're able to get, that maybe a human in that meeting taking notes might miss, whereas the transcription and the summaries are really detailed. We can ask for it to be more detailed, less detailed using AI. And again, that just saves time.
Yeah, I think it actually allows you to be more present in that meeting, actually, because you know somebody's taking that information for you. And I can see Laura nodding here in agreement. So I'm going to come to you and say, do you want to build on that? And then I'm going to ask you to elaborate if you can. If, what do you think from a JISC perspective people have to bear in mind in terms of ethics and legal considerations?
Sure. I liked what you said there about being present in the room. I think that before AI even came along, if you're sitting in a room and you're trying to listen to somebody's story and be fully present to listen to their story, I've done needs assessments in the past, and your concentration is being a human and in a room with a human. It's not about recording the information and stuff. That's all in the background because you need to do the paperwork. But you're being present with that person and knowing that you have something that is going to record and be able to catch the moments where you get involved in the story. Yeah. It will record the facts. You can really do your job more empathetically, I think, because you're really present for the person. And ethics, I think I second everything Charlotte said. I think yes, we need to be cautious, because just because something is really good and helpful doesn't mean that it comes without a risk. And so I think it's about transparency, showing where you're using the technology and how you're using the technology. And as Charlotte says, asking people if they are okay with that being used within their data being used that way. And I think if you're open and honest and transparent about those processes and show that, then people will be happy that their data is secure and that they are being looked after and that this is in their best interests and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think keeping we want to see that we use AI as a tool, but you keep to make that process better, but you keep the human element forefront to be there for students.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It does actually allow you to be, as I mentioned, present. It allows you to be the human in the room,
be
to pick up on those nuances, be person-centered, absolutely, because you're picking up on those. Somebody might say, and you might get bogged down when you're writing that notes, but actually I need to push on that. I need to think about that a little bit. I want to explore that a little bit more. I want to bring this to a close, but before I do, I want to end on, not just on ethics and legal implications, but on a considered note as well, but hopefully positive. Come to you, Charlotte, actually. What advice would you give other colleges who are just about to embark on their journey or really push on this journey of using AI as part of their accessibility and inclusion journey? What would you say are some of the key points, learning points for you? If you were going to give, 3 bits of advice, for example. Okay. If you don't have 3, that's fine.
I might have more. I'll let you know. So I think it's definitely about working with those digital teams within your organisation, agreeing on a couple of key pieces of technology that you're going to use and you're going to pilot, and have a really clear sort of idea of how you're going to use them. So for us, our starting point was reducing workload around ALNet and looking at how we could inform that process and improve things for learners. So we worked really closely to identify which tools we were going to use and how we were going to use them. And then I think it is also around for practitioners, making sure that there's really clear guidance about how they should be embedding and using them, and having some awareness of the age that those tools are intended for and the age range that they're working with, and making sure that is clear and that they're aware of that when they're introducing things into their teaching. And I also think from a learner perspective, obviously we do want to use AI to help them self-scaffold and to support executive functioning and to be that study buddy that we've talked about. But again, I think it's really important that in doing so, we provide them with really clear guidance guidance and advice about how and when those tools should be used, so that there aren't any issues such as plagiarism or issues, linked to exam and assessment, where that might be standardised and it might have to be done in a certain way, and the use of some of those tools might not be permitted.
Yeah, okay, great. And Laura, from your perspective, thank you.
Okay.
I think to end on a positive note, I think that AI is really going to help us be more proactive towards accessibility. It is a large area, there's lots to do, we're always evolving, and there always seems like there's more to do. But AI can do some of the heavy lifting. It can't do it all for us, but it can make things a little less time consuming, and it can help us do what we need to do and should be doing, but do it better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, and based on this discussion, I think it's about recognising, we have to recognise that these gaps exist, but these are human gaps. And if we can do some of the heavy lifting, if we can actually be more person-centred, that's what the technology is actually going to give us. And it sounds almost like counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense, but I think it really does. And I think AI is going to allow us to think about this idea of that we've got the gaps, but we can bridge them. And this is the tool that's going to bridge us. I want to thank you so much for your time today, and continue with the brilliant work that you're doing and keep sharing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.